Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Good afternoon. My name is Bruno Yoshimura. I'm a student at Stanford and one of the leaders of this conference. I came to Silicon Valley because I wanted to learn how I could help the entrepreneurs back in Brazil. I've been an entrepreneur myself, and I saw how difficult it is to do it without help. So I decided to start a seed-stage fund called 1VC that is bridging Silicon Valley with Brazil. And we have investments in unicorns like Rappi and great companies like Pipefy and Docket. Today, it is a pleasure to introduce the next panel, the Brazilian ecosystem from 2012 to 2018, from 2019 to the future. This panel is very important for me because exactly 7 years ago, I had the privilege to pitch to Doug Leone and to Davi Vélez when they were in Brazil, investing in the name of Sequoia. 1 year after, Davi Vélez decided to start Nubank, and Doug Leone became his investor and board member. Davi Vélez is CEO and founder at Nubank. Before that, he worked in General Atlantic, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. He then came to Stanford for his MBA program, where he started working for Sequoia, covering Latin America. Doug Leone is global managing partner at Sequoia. I think all of you already know about his successful career as an investor, so I'm going to share a little bit about his background and how he got there. Doug Leone is an immigrant from Italy that was living in New York when he heard about this thing called ARPANET. And ARPANET was the beginning of the internet as we know today, and he wanted to work in tech because of that. So he got a job at Sun Microsystem and met a guy named Vinod Khosla, who will be our next panelist. He was also impressed by the fact that Vinod Khosla was already a board member at the same age as he was, so he decided to investigate more what is this thing called venture capitalist. He then went for his master's and applied to 80 venture capital firms in Silicon Valley and moved to California. And he was hired in Sequoia, where he built this amazing career. I believe that now we're going to see the best from Silicon Valley with Doug, and the best from Brazil with Davi from Nubank. So please join me welcoming Doug Leone and Davi Vélez.
All right. Well, first of all, Doug, thank you for wearing the Nubank uniform. I promise we didn't coordinate. It was, he just showed up like that, me too, so thanks for that. So I wanted to start with a quick story. I was a Stanford MBA student. I think it was 2011. I was working with Doug, trying to figure out if we were moving to Brazil. And I have one of those moments, a little bit like in the movies when you like pinch yourself. I wake up and I'm on a plane, the only direct plane probably that exists between Silicon Valley and Sao Paulo directly. And I open my eyes and I see Doug looking at his eggs that had to be egg white, being very, very careful about what he was eating, and super focused about, staying in shape. And so I wanted to start there a little bit. Like, Doug, 2 questions on that. First, how do you stay in shape, and why are you so focused on continue to being fit? And second, why were you going to Brazil? What the hell were you doing with me in a plane heading to South America?
So to turn the clock back a little, we had decided that we were going to roll out China, India, Southeast Asia, and it seemed like global domination, this is the level of the thinking, obviously, not very deep, that we should go to Brazil. And my now son-in-law fingered David in his first month of business school. And so I cold call him, we got together. There's a few times in your career, and I'm not just rewriting history, this is a true story, where in the first 30 minutes of the interview, you know you want to work with this person. And that happened with David. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that, and we worked together for a long time. Now, why do I stay in shape? To me, it's a combination of two things, and again, being very blunt, it's a combination of one, being at the tippy-top of performance, in my mind, is a 24-hour-a-day gig. I don't think you let go for 9 hours and magically show up in the office and you perform at a super high level, point one. Point two, I would say deep-rooted insecurity. Deep-rooted insecurity that I'm going to lose an edge, and to me, the only way to survive is to accelerate. If you look at systems, they can only grow. There's no such thing as steady state. Either you grow or you die. That's how nature works. It grows as it is in its way to death, but at least it grows. And third and last, venture and the business I'm in, it is really not an old dude's game. It's an old dude's gig. And so I've got to do everything I can to maintain the edge and then get the heck out of the way when the time is right. And in my case, the time has been established. I don't want to announce it here publicly, but you've got to accelerate, perform at the highest level, and get out of the way. And that's the honest answer.
And sort of related to that and to Brazil, you were, sometimes they call you the Sequoia cowboy a bit, because I believe it's 2005 or 2006, when everybody in Silicon Valley was comfortable being in the center of the world in technology. You decided to go and figure out how to open China and how to open India, and you went and you found teams and you followed a very specific strategy. Why the discomfort of living in Silicon Valley? Why getting into a plane every week and figuring out how the hell were you going to start a local business outside Silicon Valley?
When you've been successful a little bit, the greatest danger you have is the fact you've been successful. So you have to be willing to put yourself out of business before somebody else does. Somebody else that has nothing is going to do things that you cannot imagine you would do if you've had some level of success. So you have to be willing to take risk and risk the franchise. If you're Amazon, you never want to risk the franchise. You've got clients, you've got a lot of money, you have systems. If you're in the investment business, you have nothing. You have people. So risk is the only way to no risk or to lesser risk. And so we asked ourselves one simple question. I'm rewriting history here because now I can get it down to one question. It wasn't quite so simple. But the simple question we now know that we're struggling to get to is, where are the most valuable companies in the world going to be created over the next 20, 25 years? And in order to create valuable companies, you need a large and growing economy. It says that you go to China, you go to India. Even though I grew up in Italy, I'd like to have the Portofino office. You don't go to Europe because it's big and it's not growing. And you do not go to Vietnam because it's growing and it's not big. And so that brought us to China, it brought us to India, it brought us to Southeast Asia, and we did it in a decentralized fashion. And I just want to spend 10 seconds on that. We found people and teams, and we insisted they make the decision, because we knew for sure we wouldn't get it right out of the US. There was a chance they may get it right down there. And so we took the courageous move. And so when we put those pieces in place, and we understood the world was moving towards application layer investing versus deep technology, which means that now it's the world of the 22, 23-year-olds, and that was happening globally. The fervor of startup was happening globally. And if you look at Brazil, boy, I cannot think of a country that is better positioned than Brazil. You've got oil, you've got the geographical location, you've got food. Now, whether you can get out of your own way a little bit, that's a whole different conversation. But Brazil should be in a position to be a world-dominating economy. And that appealed to us a lot, and we went to go looking.
So you built a large business in China, and you built a large business in India. Why didn't you build a large business in Brazil?
So, first of all, please keep in mind that my view of Brazil was Brazil 2013, 2012, 2013. I just want to make sure. And you should also understand the realities that we do have our hands full in China and India. And the last thing I'd say is, in our world, 1 + 1 has to equal 6, meaning that going to a new geo just because it's there, it better be strategic. And for those of you, some of you, I'm a little older than you, there's a law called Metcalfe's Law. Metcalfe he invented the internet. It says that the value of a network is square the number of productive nodes. Number of nodes and productive nodes. So we wanted to see if Brazil was going to be strategic and a productive node. So we went to Brazil, you and I, 6, 7, 8 times, and we loved going to Brazil. And we even opened up a shared office in Brazil. But then we started to notice that the companies back then were the look-alike companies, and we had learned a lesson from China. The look-alike gig only lasts so long. When an economy starts figuring out companies that are for their country, they're localized to their needs. At that point, all we had was look-alike companies. There was the Sanwa brothers that were trying to make capital the winning thing for companies, and we did not see a lot of innovations. Look, if you look at STEM graduates, STEM, science and technology, engineering and math, in Brazil, there's around 170,000 a year. In the US, which is a laggard, there's 600,000 a year. In China, there's 60 million. And so what you need above and beyond the fervor, the world, the notion the word gets around, entrepreneurship is growing, you also need a lot of software engineers. And so what we saw is a bit of lack of innovation and not as many software engineers as we had hoped to see. That caused us to say, Brazil is important, we can make investment. We invested in Despegar, we're investors in Rappi, and we're a fortunate investor in Nubank. But the effort and the pain of having yet another team, yet another fund, yet another set of headaches seemed to be too high. We would rather do what we are doing right now in other geographies, go in and try to pick some of the very best in our judgment. Back 2013. Now, things have changed. In fact, I'd like to ask you, how are things changed in Brazil over the last 5, 6 years?
Well, no, I mean, I think they've changed significantly. To your point on the copycats, I would say most of the entrepreneurship and the startup that you see today are actually addressing a real problem that you see in Brazil. And entrepreneurs are focused about how to solve that problem independently of what companies in the US are doing or companies in Europe are doing. I think you would see much more creativity about how to go around solving those problems. So I would say that's number one. Number two, clearly, there's more capital, and capital is a big part of starting that ecosystem, so that is also changing. But I would just add, the one thing that unfortunately hasn't, at least from our perspective, that hasn't really changed is your point about software engineers. And it's a big question. It's a little startling why you see today the number of people that are graduating in law in Brazil or in administração de empresas or economics is the same thing that 10 years ago. The University of Sao Paulo, USP, is graduating 42 engineers this year. The same thing like 10 years ago. And so it's almost like there is something missing about what students or what people are thinking about where the industries of the future are going to lie. And I have no idea why there is sort of still that gap in understanding of opportunities. And maybe on that, why do you think engineerings are so critical?
Well, because they're the ones that write the code. And if we look at all the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, it's a combination of software engineering and those sciences. Software engineering, look, it's all about computers right now. So if there was one advice I would give to anybody in leadership roles in Brazil is do everything you can in culture, in programs, in money, in capital, give grants to people, even free education that want to be software engineers. You need to increase that. Now, things like capital, in my mind, it's the following things. Capital doesn't lead. And if it does, it can actually kill things because if you overcapitalize, you actually do damage. One thing we know, through the connectivity of the cell phones, information travels, which is why we're seeing pockets of entrepreneurship throughout the globe. Now, Silicon Valley is still Silicon Valley. The next Silicon Valley is Beijing, but we're not seeing it throughout the globe. So that's a good fact for Brazil. Money will follow. Government regulation, the less the better, the fewer the better, except you make sure there's fair competition, that the big uglies, as I say, the big corporations, through hook or by crook, through legal or illegal means, don't stifle these little companies. But then it's got to be about the software engineers. And that's the issue that I think needs to be addressed. Number 1, 2, and 3.
So let's say, and you actually got this offer, I remember in one meeting that we had in Rio in 2011 about becoming the advisor to the city in technology. Let's say you are to advise Brazil about how to create an ecosystem similar to Silicon Valley. And you've obviously been in Silicon Valley for decades. Now you've seen China very well. You see what's happening there. You've seen also the other examples. You've seen Russia trying to create the same ecosystem that didn't work. India's having a hard time. What would you advise? How do you build that ecosystem?
So maybe I could spend 2 minutes on why I think Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley. 1, a great university. And not only a great university, but a great university with liberal programs about professors taking leaves, coming back, and a great university is that if you want to pull technology out, that you don't have to go negotiating with the licensing office for 3 years. So it's a great university with an open system mindset, point 1. Point 2, a courageous mindset. When you come to California in America, and I'm a transplant from Italy first and the East Coast second, think of the old cowboy caravan. You leave your family behind on the East Coast. So when you celebrate Thanksgiving in California, it's not with your family, it's often with your neighbors upstairs. And you have left your family behind. You've had the courage to leave and go take a shot. Okay? In fact, Boston has the exact opposite. Most of you cannot name the number 1 internet company in Boston. There's 1 or 2, but think you at Boston with MIT and God knows how many schools. Not a lot of companies. And third was the weather. Now, I mean it. You showed up here and you said, hey, I want to stay here. You know, if you go to a place that it rains and it's cold, you know, back in Wisconsin, go up there. They have a great school, the liberal program, but you freeze your everything off. And so those are the lessons. And now, why don't we go to Brazil? So the new thing is connectivity, right? The sense of entrepreneurship. That wasn't here when Silicon Valley started. So that's happening. The youth dreaming mercantile application layer investing is going to take care of that. Then there has to be the right programs, government programs, stay out first, keep everybody in check. There has to be an ecosystem, a legal ecosystem, where if you want to get something done, it cannot be 500 pages. I once handled a Boston firm do a closing for me that the stack was that big of legal documents. Silicon Valley, 2 pages. The term sheet is, our term sheet is 1 page. You know, just keep things simple. The ability to hire and fire, because companies, little companies come and go. Not that you want to be cruel to employees, you want to be very decent to your employees, but little companies run out of cash, so you have to do certain things. And lastly, I don't want to go right back to the one thing I said, that it has to increase. Number of software engineers. Because you need to start with your people locally. Now in Silicon Valley, we're now advising companies, run away. Once you are building the first core 20 software engineers, the next center, get out of Silicon Valley, because you're competing against Google and Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And so, but at least the ability to have core R&D centers. And then, the last part, and it comes slowly. I remember going to India. If you started a company in India, if you worked for a startup in India, you couldn't get married, you couldn't find a girl, because no father of a woman would allow a prearranged marriage for some crazy man that would join a startup. That was 12 years ago, but that's changed. Same thing in Silicon Valley. There has to be an ecosystem that's friendly to startups, a mindset that's friendly to startup, and a confluence of these things slowly, including 1 or 2 successes. You have to make large hay of the big successes. Nubank. Nubank is on its way, in my opinion, to being a very successful company. You want to market the heck out of Nubank to be an example to government officials, founders, blah, blah, blah. So everybody wants to have more Nubank. It starts with one success.
Thanks for that, Doug.
And Mercado Libre is that. We want to keep on having more of those.
Talk a bit about China, and the China topic is becoming more and more popular around. And I think we can debate and talk a long time about the things that are not working there. But what is actually working there when you compare it with the Silicon Valley? And you see these companies being created out of nowhere. What is there to learn about the way that ecosystem is functioning today?
There's a few things. I'm not going to make any comments about the government on purpose. And it's not a funny topic. I go to China a lot, and you can draw your own opinion about what's going on there. From a people standpoint, you have a culture that's very mercantile. They're deal doers. They're somewhat gamblers. They are the first generation of people that have means. So it's not unlike what happened in the 1950s in the US. The US now is a problem of riches. Look what the youth is worrying about, their Instagram likes. I can tell you that in China, the youth is not worried about their Instagram likes. What they're worried about is, let me have a quick dinner so I can get back to work. And then you have massive market opportunities. And then you have the most, in my opinion, one of the most capitalistic governments that is trying to do in 20 years what the US did in 50, 60 years. It's trying to fill all the holes in the economy. And then you have a whole bunch of wealth that's willing to be reinvested. And government policies, remember the number of STEM graduates. That is not by accident. It is in the culture of China. You take that combination, large market, a middle class growing at a rapid pace, super rapid pace, and you have amazing companies getting built very quickly. It used to be, so I attend a China call on a weekly basis. I've seen that business model in the US, I've seen that business model in India. You should think about this, you should think about that. Now, over half the times, we learn about a new business model. So they've learned to innovate. And so massive market, lots of engineers, mercantile, first generation. That is why China is China.
Doug, switching topics here a bit. Tell us a bit how do you get into venture capital, and why did you get into that line of business?
So I was an early employee in a company called Sun Microsystem. I called the CEO. It wasn't Vinod Khosla yet, and I decided to take a shot. What did I know? And I was a young producer. I was 25, making a ton of money, generating a whole bunch of sales. Vinod, I don't know if he's here, he won't recall that some of the public companies you made, Vinod, was because of a 25-year-old sales rep in New York City. And boy, I was a big shot in New York. And then I met Vinod Khosla, my age, maybe 1 or 2 years older. I met Scott McNeely, my age. I heard this thing called venture capital. What the heck's venture capital? But I liked the sound of it. So I did a little, back then there was no internet really. There was a book called Pratt's Guide to Venture Capital Sources, a green book this big, and I wrote 80 letters. And I told people I'm going to be in town, sweet talk assistance, like a sales guy does. The big shot is going to be in town. I had no plans to be in town, but if I got an appointment, I was going to be in town. And I got an offer. I got an offer for a summer for a firm. And I turned them down for a full-time job, and then it came time to get a full-time offer. I got a number of offers on the East Coast, but they told me I'd travel on the West Coast every week. I said, well, darn, then I might as well go on the West Coast. My summer job was gone because I turned them down like a dummy. I had a re-interview. I interviewed at Kleiner Perkins, and the only reason I didn't end up working with Vinod is because they had a 2-and-out program. You're here for 2 years and you get out. Well, forget it. I'm not doing that. And I got an offer from Sequoia who told me very simply, first of all, you should pay us to work here. Okay, well, that takes away all leverage in negotiation. And they offered me a whopping $67,000, which was a quarter what I was making in sales management. And so I took it. And I got almost thrown out after the first 3 years for being just insufferable. There was a gentleman who ran Sequoia who understood that I needed to be broken down to little pieces and let myself rebuild. And I was fortunate. The first 3 investments I made were IPOs, and they kind of had to make me a partner. And so I backed into being a partner in '93, and then in '94, Don Valentine, who ran the firm, said, I think the young guys and I should be paid the same amount. No argument there, you know, all right. And a year after that, Don Valentine came to 2 of us and said, I'd like you guys to run Sequoia, Mike Moritz and I, and you figure out if I should be around. And you figure out what you want to pay me. Wow. You know what it does to a culture of a partnership when that happens? Wow. And that's a lesson we've carried. And so I've now been fortunate to be there. I created a constitution that says I have to get out of the way. And the moment you leave, you don't collect. You just get the heck out of the way for the next generation. And so that's why I was there, and that's why we're here.
That's fascinating. Talk a bit about why would Don do that? And then maybe a bit more about the culture of Sequoia as an investing firm.
So Don do that, and there's a gentleman here over there, Brooke Byers, who's been around for a long time like I have. I don't want to embarrass this other gentleman's name, but Don attended another firm's partners meeting, trying to learn, and the founder fell asleep in that partners meeting. And Don, that really impressed Don. He'd gotten older. He did not want to be the founder that fell asleep in a partners meeting. That completely freaked him out. That is the real reason. No, it's not funny. I mean, he had a sense of not sticking around too long. And so he made that move. What the culture of Sequoia is, find people that have a lot to prove. Find people that have a chip on their shoulders, that have achieved some early failure, success, have taken shots. Mike Moritz would say we all had, you know, dominant mothers who kicked our butts, you know, and so on. There's some truth to some of that. But highly imperfect people that have this desire to win, that are different from one another. Don hired a salesperson and a writer to run Sequoia. Mike Moritz was a writer. Right now we're hiring people from Facebook and Google, and I challenge my partner at Sequoia, stop painting by numbers. Let's go find some people that come out from left field, some people that don't match the spec. Because I didn't match a spec, Mike Moritz didn't match a spec. So the culture is find a whole bunch of people that are highly imperfect, never knew the word we, the pronoun we, bring them into Sequoia, teach them the pronoun we, pay everybody about the same so compensation's off the table, and let's go execute. If you execute, you're part of the team. If you don't execute, we'll excuse you after a while, very nicely, gently, with dignity, but that's not what we need. And so that's what we have at Sequoia. We want you to produce, but if you're an asshole, we don't want you. So it's okay to be edgy. It's okay to be imperfect. Your partners will help you. Sometimes we're all over our skis, but you can't be an inherently bad human being on the inside because then you're out. And that's the culture of Sequoia, which is why we loved you, because you saw no walls. You took no prisoners. We knew right away in the first 15 minutes, this is a guy that we want.
What do you ask in that interview? What is the key question? And right before this meeting, Doug was telling me one of his partners said one thing, but he saw that his body language said something completely different. One of the things that have served you well, I imagine, as an investor and as a board member, is that ability to read people really well. What are the right questions to ask, and how do you get to that level of reading somebody?
The most important question is to why. And let me give you some examples. Let me give you the kiss of death. How did you get job B? The boastful candidate says, because I was recruited. Let me tell you what I was recruited tells me. You were a lazy ass that didn't figure out how to manage your career, that didn't figure out what market segment you wanted to be in, that didn't go and investigate every company in that market segment, chose the best one, and then went and got a job. That's what I was recruited means to me. And so I look for these little telltale signs. I listen very carefully to the words. I listen to the number of I's versus number of we's. When I write a memo, I look for the eyes. If I see one or two eyes, I remove them. There never should be an eye on a memo that you write. Never, 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 never. And so I look for the little things. I look, why have you done that? Why have you taken a chance? And so I look for people that, for Sequoia anyway, and by the way, it's perfectly okay if you want to follow the tracky life. There's nothing wrong with it, okay? Many people are happy. They got great families, spending 20 years at McKinsey. We want the exact opposite. We want people that have gone off the tracks. And it's okay to make mistakes. Now, if you've got 4 jobs and they've all failed, that's a little too much learning for our taste. But you know, if you've chosen well, if you started a large company, got your feet wet, and you chosen well, took a shot in a small company, and I found there's a great deal of correlation with your career choices with how successful you're going to be, because people are willing to be very careful when they spend $3, but very loose with the career choices they make. And so we look very carefully for people that have taken chances, gotten off the track, have great answers to why. A little self-awareness is always good. I like to ask, what have you always done well? What have you learned to do better through time because you screwed up a few times? I look for that answer. And then I ask open-ended question. And then I use some silence. I want to see what happens. You know, I once didn't hire a person because he said he won 2nd place in the Olympics. Now, if he had said, I busted my hump, I'm so proud to have come in 2nd, yes. I'm pissed as hell because I came in 2nd, yes. But I won 2nd place, no chance. You win 1st place. And so it tells you the edge that we look for. It's funny, but it tells you the edge that we look for. We look for that edge, and then we try to channel it over a long-term mindset in a team spirit of winning as a team. And then we're mission-driven. About 80% of our capital comes from nonprofits, endowments, foundations, whether they're great universities, whether they're foundations, not for just America, for the globe, or whether they're hospital centers, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, DuPont Trust. And so we know when we make these tough decisions, we're not Boy Scouts. We also take care of our families. I want to make sure everybody understands that. But boy, to have a higher cause, a higher reason to not hit that alarm clock at 5 o'clock, to get up and go do something, it adds a spring in your step.
Switching that question from who do you recruit in your team at Sequoia to how do you invest in entrepreneurs? How do you choose the entrepreneur that you want to invest behind? What is the same? How does the filter work?
Clearly, they have to be smart. They have to be able to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. They have to think very clearly. They have to show us they have to be genuine. The most genuines are the ones that go solve a problem that they have, and they don't know they're the proxy for the next God knows how many million people. You know, Andy Bechtolsheim of Sun Microsystems built a computer for himself. Cisco System built a router for Stanford University. Going back to more current things, Zappos, the shoe company, the founder couldn't find a pair of shoes. Airbnb needed some extra cash. And I love these businesses with these founders that try to solve a problem that they see firsthand. So my first question is, how did you get the insight? And the thing that makes me a little nervous is 3 of us wanted to start a company, and we got in a room, and we know nothing about A, but we ask a few clients, and we think there's a need. Second, third order issues are usually not well understood. So I look for genuine founders that have some domain experience, world-class, at least 1 engineer, because you've got to start with world-class. You start with world-class, you end up with A engineers. You start with B+ engineers, you end up with C engineers. So a small founding team, if you show up with 3 people, I'm president, I'm CEO, I'm COO, I'm chairman, forget it. You know, and people that are stubborn. Some of these adjectives that are thrown at founders that are negative, I view them as positive. You know, people that are, you know, stubborn, driven, not the greatest listener, big ego. You know, to start a company, I think you need some of those traits. And so that's what we look for.
Doug, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for spending time here with us. Hope to see you in Brazil soon.